Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As most honourable members have stated in this debate, money laundering and corruption are huge issues worldwide, and whilst I welcome some of the measures in this bill, I don't believe that it goes far enough. As the Right Honourable Member for Rutland and Melton has already been made aware and has referred to in a previous intervention, as part of the recently agreed 5th EU Anti-Money Laundering Directive, all EU member states will be required to have public beneficial owner registers by 2019. And I'm sure that he'll confirm that whether the United Kingdom is part of the EU or not at the time of the directive's implementation, the United Kingdom would not want to have any measures that are weaker than those contained in the directive. This begs the question as to what should happen in the overseas territories. Whilst the UK has made a start on the public beneficial owner register, more needs to be done in the overseas territories. As my right honourable friend, the member for Barking, pointed out in this debate, the problem is that many overseas territories are tax havens, and as such they are home to many offshore companies and are willing to offer complete anonymity to clientele with very few questions asked. Despite overseas territories having small populations, we should note that half of all global trade passes through them because they are tax havens, and the vast majority of the transactions are carried out by offshore companies. Take, for example, the British Virgin Islands, which, despite having a population of approximately only 28,000, it is home to an estimated 500,000 offshore companies, which is 40% of the total offshore companies in the world. Many of these offshore companies have complete anonymity and are shell companies working with nominees and power of attorneys to move vast amounts of money around. Most people faced with this information will conclude that there's something dodgy going on. My right honourable friend, the member for Barking, has given examples of corrupt and illegal practices that have occurred in overseas territories. Overseas territory tax havens, and these all because of the opaqueness of the systems that they operate. Right. A fully functioning public central beneficial ownership register in the overseas territories would be no cause of concern to those companies carrying out legitimate business activity. And as more and more countries agree to adopt a public beneficial ownership register, it is inevitable that the overseas territories should follow. We need to make sure that money offshore in these tax havens is not being used for illegal purposes. If there is an issue, it's that overseas territories have built their wealth on secrecy. And if that's the case, then the government should support the overseas territories to make sure this activity is based on legitimate and transparent models of business. The government should give more support to overseas territories as they transition from financial secrecy to openness. There is no reason why corporate ownership transparency should cause any problems on the provision of legitimate financial services, especially considering that many other countries will be adopting the principles of transparency registers. The people who are losing out most are developing countries, who are those in greatest need and for whom the billions that are being diverted away from them could literally be costing lives. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'll conclude by saying that a fully operational public beneficial ownership register in the overseas territories will greatly help curtail money laundering, corruption and criminal activity, but much, much more needs to be done than is presently in this bill.
Ford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Issues relating to sanctions and anti-money laundering have been dealt with under EU law for many decades, and it is absolutely right that we now in Britain treat these matters extremely seriously and make sure that the UK has all the tools it needs in its toolbox to take actions. The UK has been at the leadership in the past. Many of my colleagues here in this House have reminded us of their experience when David Cameron chaired the G8. Tax transparency was put at the top of the global agenda. I remember at that time being in the European Parliament and working with the UK Conservative-led government to increase tax transparency across Europe as well, introducing country-by-country reporting for banks. And the UK must continue to lead because the City of London is the world's leading financial centre and the financial services sector is the leading contributor contributor to British finances, and it is vital to our future economic success, and its success is based on its reputation for trust and transparency. But crime does not stand still, and those who want to continue to launder money will continue to try and evolve their behaviour, moving into new dark spaces, taking advantage of digital trade and finding new ways to exploit behaviour in a virtual world. No country has the tools to act alone, and countries must continue to work together. Of course, Britain will continue to implement anti-money laundering laws that were set in Brussels. We helped to form those laws, and we're taking action right today. In today's news, you've seen fines against William Hill. You've seen HSBC announce a warning of a potential $1.5 billion fine of their Swiss operations, and over in Europe, in Estonia, in Latvia, the central bank chief has been suspended. But if we are to continue to take action against money laundering and fraud internationally as well as domestically, then we must continue to have exchange of information, because it is data exchange that is key. It's key for our security services, it's key for our tax authorities, but it's also vital for our financial services sector. And the vast majority of our financial services companies want to be able to snap out fraud themselves. Okay, I'm sure I'm not the only person in this House who's received a phone call from their own credit card company warning them that their credit card is being used fraudulently. I was in my kitchen in England. My credit card was being used in a